Good evening. Welcome, everyone, to this review of Westfield's Safety Action Plan. This is the final public review before the plan gets finalized. So, my name is Joe Keatner. I'm the Deputy Engineer for the City of Westfield. My colleague Matt Gamelli and I manage this project for the city. With me tonight are two members of the Bowman Consulting team. And Bowman Consulting is they are helping us prepare the plan, or they're actually preparing the plan for us, I should say. Sorry. Um, so we have Eric Weiss, project manager, and Ben Breger, who is the deputy project manager. So now I will turn it over to them to lead us through this review. Eric?
Well, thank you so much, Joe. Deeply appreciative. Before we jump in, just a little bit of housekeeping. We're going, because of some past issues the city has had with Zoom meetings and people being inappropriate. Unfortunately, this means that we have to keep everybody on mute. If you do have a question that you'd like to submit, you can do so at any time. At the bottom of your screen, you should see a little icon that says Q&A or chat. And by pressing that button, you'll be able to add a question. We'll try to answer questions live during the presentation as we can, but most questions will be answered at the end. And we are told that closed captions are available for folks who need assistance with the audio. Next, please. Thank you. So one thing we wanted to be sure to do is to give a big shout out to all of the task force members. You see that list there on the left. Special thanks go to the first 5 people on this list. The mayor, obviously, and Councillor Matthews Kane, whose input has been enormously valuable. And Joe, Matt, and Randy from the engineering department, who have been terrific in managing this project for the city, especially with the departure of the previous city engineer, Allison McMorty, who is now with MassDOT. And of course, we'd also like to thank everybody who's been involved with this project in any way since the beginning over a year ago, whether you chatted with us at an event where we were tabling, or you took a survey, or you sent in some questions by email. All of those contributions help to inform the development of this plan. So thank you very much. Next, please. So here's our agenda. We're going to do a high-level review, ensuring that there's time for Q&A. Because of the time constraint, we don't have enough time to get into any serious detail, in a thorough manner. But hopefully, folks will be able to review the plan in its entirety as it is posted on the engineering website. Next, please. So moving along, our first agenda item is a little project background. Next. This project was funded by the United States Department of Transportation through a program called Safe Streets and Roads for All. We shorten it to Safe Streets for All. The intent of the Safe Streets for All program is to give municipalities and regional agencies the tools they need to reduce and ultimately eliminate serious injuries and fatalities on our roadways. A couple of years ago, City of Westfield applied for a grant to fund this project, and the city was successful, which is why we're all here today. This is built on, you see that graphic on the right, the Safe System approach. This is a new approach, relatively new in the US anyway, approach to roadway safety, which is built on the understanding that humans make mistakes, so there must be redundancy in roadway safety. So you see the 5 slices of the pie there. It's not just about safer vehicles, but also about safer speeds, designing safer roadways, making it easier for first responders to get to crashes and then get away to reach hospitals. And then there's also human behavior, things like wearing seatbelts and bike helmets. Next, please. So that was the background to all of this. And to lead us through the next section, Ben will talk about the crash data analysis.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, so I'm going to go through our findings as it relates to the crash data for Westfield and how that kind of relates and ties into our recommended improvements. So I'll just go through this relatively quickly. So I guess to start, I'll say we looked at crash data from 2016 to 2021. Now, obviously, that is beginning over, about 10 years ago. So that is the basically the last 5-year window that had been finalized by MassDOT. By the time we started this project, they've since finalized the 2022 data. But we were working with this 2016 to 2021 data, and we were working closely with the city to understand that there have been roadway improvements made since 2021. So we were conscious of like not understanding what has changed since this crash data is closed. So that was the 5-year window we looked at, which includes, pre-COVID and some of COVID as well. So there were 3,829 crashes during those 5-year window, and you can see them spatially on the map here. If you go to the next slide. So we looked at crashes as they relate to crash volumes, crash severity, and then I want to highlight 2 acronyms that you'll see throughout here: fatal and serious injury crashes, FSI crashes. And we looked at crash trends by month and year, and then we looked at vulnerable road user crashes. Vulnerable road users are folks in walking or cycling and are, more susceptible to serious injury crashes. So those are why we focus on the FSI crashes and the VRU crashes. If you go to the next slide. Awesome. So you'll see here again, there's 3,829 crashes here represented by the dots on the screen. You can just kind of click through these slides, Joe. You'll see 30% of the crashes had an injury or a fatality reported. So you see that 30% in the green there. And then we'll see if you go to the next slide, see the slice of crashes that resulted in a serious injury requiring hospitalization or a fatality. So in the 5-year window, we looked at 2.5% of crashes had a serious injury or fatality. So that amounted to 81 serious injury crashes and 13 fatal crashes. And if you go to the next slide, so that's an average of 16 FSI crashes per year, or about 1 every 3 weeks. And the goal of this project, part of the Safe Streets for All project, is formulating a Vision Zero goal. So that's the goal of reaching and eventually eliminating reducing and eventually eliminating all FSI crashes. So that's the kind of overarching goal of the plan, which we'll touch on further. So here you kind of see the trends. They're relatively, throughout the 5-year window we looked at, relatively stable in terms of trends. Unfortunately, a few fatal injury crashes per year and, 14, 10, 15 or so serious injury crashes per year. Go to the next slide. So again, a little bit more about vulnerable road users. So not surprisingly, of all crashes, those involving a pedestrian or a cyclist amount to just 3% of all crashes. So, not too many crashes involve bicyclists or pedestrian. However, 22% of all fatal and serious injury crashes do involve a vulnerable road user. So that's why we, place an emphasis on bicyclists and pedestrians, because they're far more likely to be injured seriously or result in a fatality when they're involved in a crash. So now we're just going to look at some of the results spatially through the city. So this heat map is showing all 3,829 crashes, kind of The yellow areas, reddish yellow areas are where there's the hot spots, and the light red and blue areas are kind of where it's more sparse. So, it's probably not surprising. The spatial kind of distribution focused on downtown and the main corridors in Westfield along Route 20 and Route 10 and in the downtown area. So then if the next slide shows the fatal and serious injury crashes, so these are a bit more scattered throughout the city. There's also fewer of them, so it might, I think just one or two crashes would result in a dot there or splotch. But you still see the spatial distribution downtown and along Route 20 and in those areas. And then if you go to the next slide, just shows the vulnerable road user crashes. Again, it's not surprising where most people are walking and biking is in the downtown area and along the rail trail area. So that's where you're seeing the most crashes involving a cyclist and pedestrian. Great. All right, so now I'm going to pass on to Eric to talk about public engagement and the efforts we've done.
Terrific. Thank you, Ben, for that summary. And Joe, if we can go to the next slide. So this part of our presentation is all about the public engagement that was carried out as part of this project over the last 12 or 13 months. The data analysis that Ben just walked us through gives us a really good start on where we should focus our attention. But public engagement, which is talking with people at events and at meetings and having conversations with stakeholders and conversations with our task force members, this has been really critical for informing where we're going to make recommendations and what's the nature of those recommendations. So, for instance, we see 3 events where we tabled in 2025, the Mayor's Bike Ride, Westfield 5K, and at the Senior Center for, I believe it was called Senior Options Day. Next, please. And we had 2 evenings of an open house about the project at the Athenaeum last August. Talked with a lot of folks and gathered a lot of feedback. Next, please. So here's a couple examples of exercises that people could participate in to help tell us, the team, what their concerns are. So on the right, you see a map. We asked people to jot down their concerns, color-coded by topic on different Post-its, and then pin them to the map for the location they're talking about. That photo on the left excuse me, that photo on the left is asking folks to indicate what sort of strategies they prefer for public safety. So one thing that we learned from this, for instance, is that many more people prefer separated shared use paths for bicyclist safety over bike lanes. And so this is all really important information for us, helping get us in the right mindset as we prepared to make recommendations for trouble spots. Next, please. We also got a lot of information from the survey. We had something like 180 people answer the survey, mostly online, but some on paper too. And we learned a lot, such as where people do want to feel safer traveling to. And the top answers there, as you can see, were downtown and shopping, and parks was number 3. Next, please. Another question was, what are your top transportation safety issues? And people's top issues were distracted driving and speeding, a poor pavement condition and potholes, and intersections that feel unsafe. Next, please. And then similar to that exercise with the colored dots, asking people to select the top safety improvements they'd like to see. And the top 4 were greater enforcement of existing traffic laws. People wanted to see safer crosswalks, better striping and pavement markings to help guide motorists and other roadway users, And folks were also voting for reducing speeding through traffic calming measures like speed humps and narrower lanes. Next, please. Another important piece of our engagement was this interactive comment map online. People were asked or invited to drop comments specific to certain topics. So you see lots of different colors on here. So for instance, when you see a purple dot on there, that meant somebody wanted to contribute a comment related to car safety, motorist safety. When you see a green dot, that the green ones are about bicyclist safety. So next, please. And here's a couple examples of comments that people added to the map. That one that we're showing on the left was specific to the intersection of Southampton Road and North Road, and a safety issue related to drivers using the shoulder to skip around the queue of people waiting at the light. The example on the right is more a pedestrian issue from somebody who wanted to be able to walk to Stanley Park, but doesn't feel safe doing so from their neighborhood because there are no sidewalks on City View Boulevard. These are very helpful comments, helping to inform our work again. So next, please. So having completed the data analysis that Ben talked about, and having analyzed all of the public engagement information that we got, we were then able to combine the two to move into the next and probably most exciting piece of the project, which is project identification. And for that, Ben will walk us through the next slides.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Eric. So yeah, if you go to the next slide, I'll start. I'm going to start at a higher level, kind of like the citywide, like top safety issues, and then narrow into the more specific projects and concept plans. So one of our first exercises was basically take the trove of public feedback we got from community members and residents and the crash data that we looked at and kind of begin to synthesize like what are the top safety issues that Westfield is dealing with. And some of these are unique to Westfield, some of these are just kind of common safety issues across communities, but I think these ones are rooted in the feedback we received and what the crash data was telling us. And so what we found, basically we did this exercise to basically categorize each of the public comments, applying like different tags to them, and then found like what categories or emphasis areas, what kind of buckets they fit into. And we developed these four safety issues. So the top one would be excessive vehicle speeding. The second one is unsafe and low visibility pedestrian crossings. Third is driver confusion and intersection geometry. So basically, confusion around how you're supposed to navigate certain intersections, such as the, roundabout downtown in Park Square, and then sidewalk, ADA, and bicycle network gaps. So indicating like, oh, there's a sidewalk here that, abruptly ends. Here's an example on Southampton Road, and there's no way to, cross the road once I get to the end of the sidewalk. So for each one here, I provided an example quote, but for each of these, there's many quotes and comments that we received that kind of back up those issues. And in the full plan posted online, we provide all those comments and how they've been categorized. And so if you go to the next slide, we provide just a snapshot of the citywide actions, just because I didn't want to lay out every single one as it's written in the plan. But essentially for each top safety issue, we developed with the city some kind of like aspirational goals, but kind of just some principles to look into. So for excessive vehicle speeds, using street design to slow traffic and promote safer speeds, reinforcing speed limits through design, education, and enforcement, and then focusing on schools, walking routes, and high crash areas. So that would be examples of citywide actions for vehicle speeds. For low visibility and unsafe pedestrian crossings, just improving visibility and making crossings easier to understand. That could take the form of lighting improvements or, trimming vegetation around crosswalks, or, restricting parking up against crosswalks is often an issue just to make people more visible, or doing crosswalk bump outs, raised crosswalks, those types of things. Um, and so, yeah, for each top safety issue, we developed a list of top or citywide actions that the city can focus on, as they're, repaving roads or going through design and engineering processes. If you go to the next slide, Joe. So that's like covers the citywide actions, but then working again with the crash data and the input we heard from community members, we identified the top 20 locations in the city, and this is a mix of intersections and roadway segments. The key and I might count that there's only 19 on the map here, but there are two sections of North Elm Street that we looked at here. And so you'll see again, as we mentioned in the crash data, it's focused in the downtown area, but also along East Main Street, North Elm Street. And then we also, cover intersections and roadways in the northern part of the city, and also on Shaker Road, where we heard a lot of community feedback about issues on some of the curves on Shaker Road. So we can go to the next slide. So now I'm going to go through just quickly, talk about some of the countermeasures we looked at. This project was funded through Federal Highway and Administration, and they've developed these list of proven safety countermeasures. And these are basically roadway improvements that are proven through data and evidence-based to improve safety at intersections. And so we, started with these, and then, recommended these. Basically, our process was to identify, the safety countermeasures for each location in those 20. And then we also developed the concept plans for the top 5. So these are like the intersection countermeasures. And then if you go to the next slide, Joe, there's also speed management countermeasures. Such as speed safety cameras and variable speed limits, pedestrian and bicyclist safety countermeasures, as we mentioned, like crosswalk visibility enhancements, flashing beacons, road diets, and something called leading pedestrian interval, which is basically where pedestrians start crossing the road before vehicles get their green light, just to make pedestrians more visible. Here's another example. The next slide includes recommendations for roadway departure, such as edge treatments, wider edge lines, rumble strips, median barriers, and then improvements at curves. And then the final category is cross-cutting, which basically cuts through multiple categories, such as lighting, more safety planning and safety audits, and then pavement management with a friction top surface. And so for each, if you go to the next slide, Joe, each of our locations, which we'll get into, I guess I'll start with looking at our top 20 locations. We worked with the city and the task force to prioritize these locations. We looked at 7 different criteria, and evaluated the projects and prioritized them that way. So we looked at locations that are high crash locations for pedestrians and cyclists, high crash locations for all vehicle types. We wanted to prioritize locations under city control because, let MassDOT deal with the state-owned roads, and the city can handle the roads under their control. And then locations near schools and parks, near subsidized or senior housing, near PBTA stops, and then giving emphasis to those locations that were identified on the public comment map. So the resulting list is here, the top 20. There are a number of ties, as you can see. So there's 3 tied for top place and then 4 tied for 5th place. But this was the resulting list, and we developed concept designs for those first 5 on the list. You can see those are, again, predominantly downtown. That's okay. You can go to the next slide. And so we'll go through 2 of those locations. And again, as Eric alluded to, the full plan is available online, and so you can look at the full concept plans for the 5 locations there. I'd encourage folks to do that, as well as our recommendations for the other 15 locations. So again, just for example, Orange Street, Elm Street was one of the top locations in an intersection in downtown that has multiple kind of different safety concerns that we heard about and observed. So the main one being the left turn from Orange Street onto Elm Street going north. There's some visibility issues, and also that often gets backed up. And so we looked at that. We also looked at some of the crosswalk visibility issues. And I should note too, for the 2 concept plans presented here, this one and the next one, these are just high-level engineering or high-level preliminary concept plans, and both of them would require further engineering analysis. So while this is the beginning of a concept, like any of them would require further study and analysis for how they would impact operations throughout the city, especially in the downtown circulation network. So this idea would be that shown on the screen here on the right would be to restrict left turns through the use of a flex post, for example, could be one idea. And so you force folks to take a right on Elm Street to go south. Because if you take away that left turn movement, it simplifies and reduces conflict points. And then adding the rectangular rapid flashing beacons to the crosswalk here. And so, yeah, that's the recommendation for Orange at Elm Street. And then the next location is for North Elm Street, going the northern segment of North Elm Street as you're headed up to Southampton. So this is the first location is at the intersection with Holyoke Road. We observed safety concerns and heard safety concerns at the crosswalk here. Because cars are going very fast, and they almost treat this like an off-ramp to go onto Holyoke Road. So we are proposing to do a raised crosswalk, flashing beacons, yield signs, and just basically calling attention to this crosswalk here for this location. And then the next segment, if you go to the next slide, is further south on North Elm Street at Lockhouse Road, where there's also some that left turn movement onto Lockhouse Road certainly causes congestion for when cars are queuing there to turn left, but then also safety concerns, especially rear end crashes we saw a lot of in the data. So looking to basically, we couldn't make a full left turn lane. However, but adding the shared through and left pavement markings kind of indicates to folks early on that there is a left turn, and that folks are going to be making left turns from that lane. Adding like an intersection control beacon that's overhead of the intersection with a yellow flashing light just to call attention to the intersection and the possibility of stopped cars in that location. And then, not that there are many left turns from Lockhouse onto North Elm Street, but making this a mountable right out only channelization would help reduce those conflicts as well. So if you go to the next slide, Joe. So yeah, that kind of concludes our high level overview of the kind of project identification. I'd encourage folks to look at the action plan in more detail for more information. So thank you, and I'll pass it on to Eric, who is going to go into our policy section.
Well, thanks, Ben. And so since Ben did, as I did earlier, invite people to go to the engineering webpage to take a better look at the draft plan, I want to mention we've heard from a couple people that they are having trouble loading the plan on that page. For some folks, it seems like it's taking 10 or 15 seconds for it to actually show up on the page. It's a very big file. So there'll be a place on the page where it says, here's the plan, and it might not look like there's a plan there. But if you wait 10 or 15 seconds, it'll show up. So we're just asking folks to be patient and wait for that to load. So there are a number of items that are requirements by US DOT to include in a safety action plan. For instance, Ben was talking about the prioritization of the identified projects. Prioritizing the projects is a requirement of a safety action plan. So here's another one. We are required to do a policy analysis as part of a safety action plan. So to do so, we reviewed city ordinances and policies and interviewed pertinent city and state staff, folks who have a role in roadway safety in Westfield. This analysis of Westfield's policies and processes, we believe it's gonna, the recommendations will play a role in reducing injuries on Westfield streets as well. So next, please. We came up with a number of policy recommendations and divided them up by which department would be responsible for following through on these recommendations. So for instance, here are two that are relevant to the engineering department. So lane widths. So typically Public Works repaves roads or restripes roads with the same lane widths as what was there before. There's no city policy on lane widths, and if they should narrow them during paving projects, we think it would be a good idea to incorporate such a review to see if it's appropriate to narrow lanes on certain streets. This brings speeds down, which results in a safer street. We're also recommending that a sidewalk network plan be created. Next, please. For the Department of Planning, our recommendation is related to roadway width in subdivisions. Currently, for small subdivisions like we're looking at on this photo here, the requirement is that a street be no less than 24 feet wide. We believe that such a street could really be 20 feet wide or 22 feet wide. That would encourage slower motor vehicle speeds and create the sort of street that parents would feel more comfortable having their kids play on or ride their bikes around on. Related to public safety, we are recommending that the police department take a closer look at the size of fines that are related to roadway safety. So for instance, if you're ticketed for parking on a sidewalk or in a crosswalk, the fine is something like $15 to $25. And that may not be much of a deterrent for people to stop them from parking on a sidewalk or on a crosswalk. So we're recommending that a review be done to see if it's time to raise those fines. And as part of that, a progressive ticketing campaign could be enacted. What this means is it's a three-step process. The first step being education and outreach to city residents, letting them know that greater enforcement is going to start. Part two is starting with the tickets, but they're just warnings for a while, getting people used to it. And finally, the third step is actual issuing of fines. Next slide, please, Joe. And then there were some other recommendations that you can see here that aren't specific to and aren't necessarily specific to any particular department. I'll make note of the third bullet here. It's been 6 years since the city last took a close look at which streets have truck prohibitions. We recommend that that list be reviewed more frequently because conditions on the ground can change quickly. And for safety's sake, it may be important to be a little more nimble with the establishment of truck prohibitions on Westfield streets. Next, please. So I did mention that there are a number of required elements to a completed safety action plan. And the reason it's important to have all these so we can call this a truly completed plan is that if it doesn't have all these elements, the city can't use the plan as the basis to go after certain types of federal funds to actually implement recommendations. But we're talking about bigger sums of money that can actually be used for construction. So one of those elements is Vision Zero. It's a term that simply means having a goal to fully eliminate roadway fatalities and serious injuries by a certain date. It's a non-binding goal. I think that's very important to note. If the city doesn't reach its goal in time, it doesn't mean that anybody's on the hook for anything in particular, but it's a goal to work towards. So Westfield's goal, as worked out with the task force in the course of this process, is to reach 0 roadway fatalities and serious injuries by 2046. So that's a 20-year goal. For comparison, Chicopee recently completed their safety action plan, and they opted for a 15-year goal, a little more aggressive. Pioneer Valley Planning Commission is putting the final touches on its regional safety action plan, and they selected a 25-year goal. So we feel very comfortable in this 20-year goal nestled right between these other ones in the region. And we believe that it's a reachable goal through a combination of working on those troubling intersections and roadway segments, along with the policy updates, and of course, all the technological changes that we're seeing in automobiles themselves. If you think about what automobile safety technology was like 20 years ago, there were no backup cameras in cars. We didn't have the little alarms when, as cars do now, like when you're straying out of your lane and it looks like you might accidentally go out of your lane. Some modern cars have those. We didn't have that 20 years ago. So 10, 15, 20 years from now, it's really hard to say what technologies will exist then, but we know that they're going to advance. So the last piece of a completed safety action plan is related to tracking progress and ensuring transparency in this process for the public. So on the next slide, you'll see we have 2 recommendations to address this requirement. The first is we recommend that a committee be tasked with staying on top of this effort, meeting periodically, whether that's every 6 months or maybe just annually, to track progress towards that Vision Zero goal. That committee could be an already existing one. It could, for instance, be the task force that came together for this plan. It doesn't require that an all-new committee be created. And to cover the transparency piece, our recommendation is that the crash dashboard, which is already in place and can be seen through the same page on engineering's website that this plan is posted on, we recommend that it be maintained as a public resource, updated when new data comes in, and continue to be publicized as a resource for folks in Westfield so everybody can monitor progress towards that Vision Zero goal. And that is our very high level review of the safety action plan. You can see Ben put a link in the chat. If you haven't already gone to visit this safety action plan, strongly recommend that you do so. And it looks like we have about 20 minutes left, and we'd love to answer whatever questions you may have. And Peter, since we don't have a whole lot of people here in this meeting, I'm not super concerned about
They can unmute
Zoom
themselves.
Yeah, I think rather than adding a question to the chat, folks can just unmute themselves, and we can have more of a conversation. Well, we do have a while for questions. Seems that nobody has a question right this second. So folks can stick around if they want. Ben and I, with Joe, can take some time to offer a little bit more detail on anything in particular. You know, you don't have a very specific question, but if anybody's interested in learning more about one of the intersections or roadway segments and our recommendations for that,
Eric, it looks like Luke Adams has a question.
terrific.
Oh, yeah. Hello. Sorry, it took me a sec to figure out the microphone. So you chose to focus on roads that the city is responsible for, which makes sense given the context of this review. But how can the data that you've collected and the information that you've collected feed into MassDOT and inform them in prioritizing roads within Westfield that need to be improved?
That's an excellent question. Thank you, Luke. And Joe, I wonder if we can go back to that prioritized list of our 20 locations. And I don't remember the slide number, but maybe you can see, since you're the presenter, maybe you can sort of scroll back through the presenter mode to find that slide, because that would make it easier to answer Luke's question, I think. There we are. Thank you, Joe. So yes, through the prioritization process, the task force did determine that they wanted our plan to rank projects more highly if they're under city jurisdiction rather than the state. And as you can see here, there were 6 locations with MassDOT jurisdiction of the 20, but because of the prioritization process, they tended to rank lower. Doesn't mean that they're not important. They still made the top 20. There are a lot more than 20 intersections and roadway segments in the city of Westfield. So they may not be the top of the top, but they're still high priority. Everything on this list is a high priority. And we're going to recommend that the city share this with the regional MassDOT district so that they can be informed as MassDOT approaches roadway safety on its streets. I want to also mention, because I don't know if we did, that this entire process of examining streets in Westfield omitted limited access highways, and in Westfield that means Mass Pike and the on and off ramps for the Pike. Luke, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
And we have a question from, it says iPhone 6. Could you just give us your name so we could put it in the notes?
I think iPhone 6 might have been Luke. Oh, no, I'm wrong. Well, somebody who joined by phone unmuted briefly. If you'd like to unmute again and speak your question, we'd be delighted to answer. So if anybody has questions, you'll recall that in the to respect everybody's time and to make sure that we'd have a lot of time for Q&A, Ben only provided detail on 2 of our projects here, 2 of our locations, that is. The one that's top of the list here, North Elm segment from Notre Dame to Holyoke, and the other location being the 3rd one on the list, which was tied for first, the intersection, the 5th one on the list, the intersection of Elm Street and Orange Street. But if there's anybody on the line right now who'd like to get more information about any of the other 20 locations, we'd be happy to oblige.
Jonathan, looks like you had a question. You can unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Thanks. I actually have two questions. One is, could you go into more detail as to the logic or the rationale behind the selection of a year for the Vision Zero target? Sort of like how you arrived at that, sort of what pieces of information you used to arrive at that year specifically. And I can ask my second question now, or we can answer that one first, whichever you prefer.
Yeah, I can address that. And thank you, Jonathan. Um, because we don't understand what automobile technology is going to be, none of this is actual math. It's more about expectations for that automobiles will become safer as time progresses, but also looking at the locations and what sort of improvements are going to be needed. So for each of these locations, in the plan, you'll see detailed explanations of what we believe is needed and what sort of timeline and cost is involved for each of those improvements. So the 20-year goal is the result of looking at expectations about when funding might come in, how long a project would be expected to take, and again, expectations about the future of improvements in automobile safety technology. Thank you,
Okay.
Jonathan, for that good question. And you had a second question?
Thank you. Yes. My second question is in reference to a slide you had about suggestions to like the engineering department to review like roadway width standards as it comes to restriping and repaving. Building off of that, does the city have, if you found in your review, or would you recommend the city develop some sort of like street or roadway sort of design guide that sort of separates out what treatments or suggested widths or other things would be appropriate for different types of streets? So this could include like striping or traffic calming measures, just so that when the city comes to repave a neighborhood street versus a major arterial, what sorts of elements, say roadway safety elements, can be used as part of that, and also for residents to refer to as well. I've been to lots of traffic commission meetings where people ask for traffic calming elements on their neighborhood street. And we actually, the Friends of the Columbia Greenway Rail Trail had a comment on a Facebook post about a specific neighborhood street, and what traffic calming measures could be installed on that street. So it's a long-winded question, but, is there a way to identify appropriate traffic calming measures on different types of streets that both the city itself and the residents can use to arrive at potential treatments?
Jonathan, I like that question, and thank you for bringing that up. We did not, as part of this plan, make a recommendation that the city create such a set of guidelines. It's not unheard of, but at the same time, there are a lot of resources already out there. I'm sure you know about guidelines and design handbooks and stuff like that from, for instance, NACTO is doing a lot of good work in that arena right now. NACTO is the National Association of City Transportation Officials. And they're doing some really great work developing guidelines for city roadway design, as well as guidelines specific to roads shared with transit or where bicyclists and pedestrians are expected to be a heavy part of the traffic. But for sure, if the city did have such a thing, that would make the process simpler. But creating a customized tableau of options is itself a bit of work. I wonder if Joe, our deputy city engineer, has a thought about this.
Yeah, I don't know if there will be everything, but like we are taking a look at some details for for plans, but also we could take a look at some of the recommendations for when to use certain traffic calming measures, for instance, because like we want to be judicial with our use of them, so that things are not being confusing and things are not, we have a limited budget, of course, and so we need to take that into consideration. And like one of the examples is like RFBs, like the rectangular flashing beacons. They are great, and like I believe it was Randy from your office, Eric, that helped us come up with like some guidelines for when those are best used. Because ideally, we can't put them at every crosswalk. It's just not going to work that way in the real world. But if we have like some guidance on what the best places to use these things, like that's just one example. But we could take a look at looking at some of the other options as well. But like Eric said, there are groups like the one that he mentioned that have provided some guidance already. But to do it street by street or anything like that's a big lift. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Hi. Sorry, I'm the one that had the dogs barking. I apologize if you guys.
Okay, is this Kristen?
No, this is Doreen, and I'm the
okay.
iPhone. I'm the iPhone one.
Yes, okay.
So I apologize. I've been trying to play around with this and figure out how to make it work. Anyhow, so two concerns. One is that I feel like with the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit in Westfield, I went to a traffic commission meeting a while ago, like last year, and talked about how there's signs everywhere that don't even fit the criteria, and they were supposed to look at that and change it. And as far as I can see, nothing has been done. There's still 25-mile-an-hour speed limit signs in sections that are not thickly settled or even close. Which is really kind of off path of what you guys are talking about. But the other most important thing is whenever I've had any interaction with the Westfield Police about, speed limit enforcement or signage enforcement or anything, they just don't have enough staff to make it happen, is what they will literally say is that, we don't have enough staff. We can't enforce all this stuff or even close to it. And I wonder if there's any way we can look at that. I mean, I realize that budget being what budget is, it's a challenge, but I mean, we can do everything we want, but if somebody's not looking at what's going on, it's not going to do any good. I mean, I live on Western Ave and there's like dirt bikes up and down. And, today I was driving down past the park and there was somebody on what looked like it was a mini bike riding straight down the middle of the road. No plates, no anything. I mean, these are the people that are going to get killed, the e-bikes and stuff like that. And we need somebody to enforce this stuff.
Right. So Doreen, that's a really good point. And thank you so much for contributing that comment. And Westfield is certainly not alone when it comes to, wishing it had more budget for certain city departments. But that's one of the great things about the safe system approach is that it has, if you'll recall that graphic, it was that sort of pie chart graphic near the top of our presentation and so, having the multiple layers of addressing traffic safety issues is what makes the safe system approach so good. So the city may not have as much budget as some folks might want for traffic enforcement, but if at the same time, engineering and public works and planning and communications and the mayor's office are all able to carry out other activities related to roadway safety, hopefully all together, with these multiple layers, we'll be able to make the progress that we need to make.
No, I understand. I understand that approach. The only other comment that I would like to make is that I feel like Also, there's a lot of signage out there, like almost like it's exploded lately, and I don't know why. It seems like there's signs on telephone poles and uh, I'm a nurse, and it's like call bells and emergency bells, and if there's too many of them, they start getting ignored, and I worry that that's happening, that we have like a lot of signage in Westfield that has to do with traffic that people just start not seeing it when it's everywhere, and I'm not even sure that it's okay to be putting speed limit signs on telephone poles, and it's like they've tacked them up all over the place, at least in my area where I am, and I see it, on City View. I see it all, Northwest Road. They're just throwing signs up everywhere. Did you have any? Do you see where I'm saying with that you get exhausted of signs and people just stop paying attention?
Yes, thank you, Doreen, for that. And I really like your analogy to your experience as a nurse and hearing the call bells. I suppose if there was somebody on our meeting today who was a flight attendant, it might be the same thing regarding, flyers pressing that button over their head repeatedly. You just sort of eventually stop paying as much attention. And it's absolutely true. And that's precisely related to something Joe said just a couple moments ago about the RRFBs, the rectangular rapid flashing beacons that we see downtown.
Mhm.
They're very useful. They're proven to be useful in reducing injuries to pedestrians. But if you put them up super often, people are just going to stop paying attention to them. So I think your comment is very appropriate.
Right. And call bells are it's the emergency alerts that you put so many alerts out there, and then people are like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like Western Ave, I lived past the college, and we didn't have any. I'm surprised no college kids got killed crossing over into the lot. And thank God we have that flashing sign now. That was one of the improvements that has happened in the last couple of years. And that's a great example of really necessary, really effective, because on a dark, rainy night, you could not see those students passing in front of the old Juniper Park School to go down into the annex lot there. So yeah, we need that stuff, but we don't, like you said, we have to be careful in Westfield that we're just gone crazy with signs. I mean, in the last week, all along Western Ave, there's a stop sign at the end of every single side street. Is that an initiative in Westfield, or is that, I mean, like I get it on crossroad streets where it's not obvious, but like, I don't know. I just feel like we've gotten sign crazy in the last 6 months.
Okay.
Um,
Thank
anyway.
you for that. Thank you for that comment.
Yeah.
Appreciate you weighing in. I'm keeping an eye on the clock, and I see it's 8, but I don't want to let anybody go before I address Kristen's question in the comments, because it's a really important one. Kristen, thank you for typing that one in. And in case then anybody can't see her question, I'll read it. She wrote, are any of the projects funded now or in the current budget? If not, is there a grant application for this work in progress? And by current budget, I mean the one we're now reviewing. So this is really important, and it is something that we considered as part of this process. In fact, when we made our first list of roadways, there were, Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe there were 5 on our initial list that it turned out are already in the pipeline for getting improvements.
Yeah.
And thank you for confirming that. And so we removed them because they're already in the pipeline, and those improvements are going to be made outside of what we're working on right now. And then, is there a grant application for this work in progress? The answer is yes, with an asterisk. Without getting into too much painful detail, the Safe Streets for All program offers a couple different types of grants. This one was funded through this project was created through a planning grant. There's another type called a supplemental planning grant. And the city of Westfield did apply. In fact, it was just 2 days ago, Tuesday, was the deadline for that grant application to pursue funds to do to get more in depth on Ben, do you recall how many or which locations? Or Joe, perhaps you recall.
Yeah, it was sorry, yeah, it was North Elm Street and the Orange Street Elm Street intersection.
Right. Thank you very much. So, and then once the safety action plan is fully adopted by the city, which means that the city council has said, yes, this is now officially a city plan, then that means the city can use it as a stepping stone to go after implementation funds to then actually pay for the improvements that are being recommended in this plan. It's likely that the next round of funding for implementation grants won't be until next spring. So that gives us a little bit of time to get this through the city council process. But in short, Kristen, the answer is yes, the city will be able to go after implementation funds. And yes, the city has already applied for funds to get better detail on 2 of the projects on this list, which will then make it easier to go after implementation funds. It'll just make for a much stronger grant proposal if we can include all that new information that could be developed. So thank you, Kristen, for that question. Very important. You bet.
I should add too, I did misspeak. The grant application does include a third location around Park Square, so it'd be the Broad Street, Court Street, Elm, and Main Street location as well, which is a very important one as well.
Thank you for clarifying, Ben. So our hour is up. However, if there is a last question that anybody would like to either type in the chat or unmute themselves and speak out loud, Ben and I would be more than happy to address that last question.
Eric, I don't see any others, but I just want to remind people that we can, if you think of something after on the last slide, which I will go to right now. Oops, I made a mistake and I don't know what I'm doing now. I'm sorry for my lack of technological skill here.
Not a problem. Rather than that link on that last slide,
Yes.
folks can see the link in the chat. It's the second comment posted by Ben at 7:32. So that's a way to get to that webpage. And through that link, folks should be able to find contact information. But I can also just tell folks that there's an email address. There we go. Thank you so much, Joe. There's that email address there, engineering@cityofwestfield.org. Please use that to submit any further questions or comments, or you can leave a voicemail on that phone number that you see there. And we hope to get more questions and comments. Thank you all very much. We're all grateful for your participation tonight and truly grateful for all the excellent questions that people asked. Thank you so much to everybody involved, and see you around the neighborhood.
Thank you, everyone.
Great. Have a good night, everyone. Take care. Thank you.